Today we're talking about what you can learn from the pros. What we're going to do is we're going to look at picks, at pathing strategies, at items that you can utilize in your games. Not everything that pro players use, and especially things that revolve heavily around a whole team comp, is applicable for casual games, and the meta in pro games is often quite different. Therefore, I try to isolate the things that are actually applicable for us normal players and that have some level of usefulness for us. Last year I didn't have time to watch the Pro League much, and it made me realize that I was missing out on a lot of potential interesting strategies, information that I could use. So I figured this year I'm going to summarize this information, especially for those of you who are not actively watching the Pro League, but also those who are not watching every single game, or those who are not focusing on every single detail of every single game. Of course, there will also be more things that I potentially miss, so feel free to add those in the comments if you watch the games. And also, regarding the game in the background, I'm just gonna show the earliest parts, so there won't be any spoilers here in case you want to watch the games later. Before we get started, I want to emphasize once again that this is not for team strategies, but rather for single things that individual players can apply for themselves. So for example, something I won't discuss much is having a mage in duo lane and an ADC in mid lane. That's something we see in the Pro League, but in most of your games you can't necessarily use it. I've split this up by the roles, and the first one is going to be jungle. Something that pretty much all junglers in the Pro League do is starting the game with Hand of the Gods. No matter which jungle path they take, it's always used on the back harpies in order to get to middle lane quicker. This will especially be effective once Hand of the Gods has its new buff, which wasn't the case in the Pro League yet, so the clear will be even better with that. Many junglers currently start at speed and then go straight to blue buff. This is something that you have to make sure with your solo laner at the start of the game, because they have to start differently as well. We'll get to that in the solo section, but it's a very common strategy at the moment. Of course, you can still go the other way and just go to speed, then harpies, and then blue buff as well. A frequent item start is tier 1 mace at the moment. It's just the most effective item that you can get at that price point right now, as it allows you to get Hand of the Gods and an extra potion, as well as having a good starting point in terms of damage. In terms of boots, Ninja Tabi is actually valued on quite a few junglers more than it was before, and we also saw multiple uses of Talaria boots from Scream, put it on Hunbats and on Thor, so you don't have to be stuck with the Warrior Tabi all the time. Transcendence generally fell out of the meta for many of the junglers. It just isn't as valuable without the CDR at the start. We did, however, see it being picked up on Thor still, so it's not completely terrible. Items that have high value still, of course, are Erendite and Heartseeker. We'll see how that changes for Heartseeker with the nerf, but I think it'll probably still be very valued. Jotun's Wrath is also valued a lot more than it was for a while, especially since it's just often more effective to get that instead of Transcendence now, as you don't have the whole issue of stacking it and you're starting with a mace anyways. Blink is still valued among junglers despite the nerf. I know some people thought that it would fall off, but really it's still a very good relic. We had two notable picks outside of the norm, at least for the Pro League. One of them was Kali, picked by Cherio, starting the build with a Crusher and Warrior Tabi, and then going into an AA-focused build. Kali, not completely unusual in ranked or casuals, but I think it's interesting that she made her way into the Pro League as well, so we might see her more on all levels of play. And the other one was Sun Wukong as a jungler with a full damage build. Sam4Soccer played that, unfortunately did not win the game though. And that brings us to the next role, which is the carry. One of the big deals in terms of meta shifts for carries is that Devourer's Gauntlet is absolutely and definitely back. Almost every game that had two physical hunters included both of them building Devourer's Gauntlet, unless they were played in mid lane or it was an Ullr. Devourer's Gauntlet is just extremely strong after the buff. This is not a surprise really, especially with Transcendence being nerfed at the same time. I think the buff went too far and we now see a heavy shift towards Devils on pretty much all of them again, but that's what it is. We were kind of expecting it a little bit. In terms of builds, the most common ones right now are a classic Concise build and a Rage build. The Concise build is Devourer's Gauntlet, Ninja Tabi, Executioner, Concise, Titan's Bane, and then the last item is often Odysseus' Bow, but you could also see that with Toxic Blade, for example, or you could see that with a late game Rage as well, especially swapping that out for boots, and Rage then being a single crit item. Rage right now is so strong that it works as a single crit item, so this is something we'll commonly see, I think. The Rage build is essentially just with the goal of going for full crit, So you're going for Devils as well, into Ninja Tabe, Executioner, and then Rage, or the other way around in some rare situations. And then afterwards you fill it up with the crit items of your choice. It is worth noting that, for example, Netroid built Wind Demon and Poison Star after Rage and did not build Deathbringer at all, so it's not necessarily core at the moment. Where we see major ADCs more in the middle lane, in the form of Oloran especially, we do often see them being built with Shoes of the Magi now. I think that's worth noting, because that has the extra lifesteal now, so that's very effective as a magical carry item if you're playing magical carries. Moving on to solo lane. As I said in the jungle section, many solos currently have a different start. They're starting on blue and have the jungler rotate over to blue buff right after clearing speed. That means they start blue on their own and take a little bit of damage from blue buff before the jungler can take over. It also means that they lose a little bit of lane pressure, but in return they guarantee a very early blue buff before the first wave even, and they get all the gold and XP from blue and don't run any risks there. They don't have to run back in the middle of a laning state, basically, of a wave. So it comes with benefits and downsides. It also comes with an opportunity. If you see the enemy solo laner start in lane, then you know they're not getting blue right away, and you can consider invading or going for their jungler specifically together if that's what you feel like. The most common start for solo laners currently is going for Warrior's Blessing with a Chalice of Healing and multi-potions. That way they still have the opportunity to get multiple types of healing at the same time, get a little bit of mana back, and generally have a lot of sustain in the lane. Despite the price change, Mystical Mail is currently not favored, at least in the Pro League. I find this very interesting. I thought it would see more popularity, and I know a lot of other people did too, but so far the Pro League chose to go other path. That doesn't necessarily translate over to your casual games or ranked games, so I think, in my opinion, Mystical Mail has more impact there. Otherwise, in terms of builds, we didn't see anything that was generally surprising, as solo items kind of stayed the same for the most part, but we did see some interesting combinations that I wanted to mention. Vaman was picked and was built with a relatively early, I think 3rd slot Frostbound Hammer and then a late Toxic Blade, in order to get the movement speed and slow that way. Guardians are also relatively popular in the Pro League at the moment. We saw a Sobek and a Jormungandr pick, and we actually saw some interesting item choices as well. These Guardians build Shoes of the Magi in order to increase their early clear, which is usually their biggest weak point. In Sobek's case, played by Nika, he also built Shield of Regrowth with it, which I think is a very interesting item choice. It obviously works for Sobek, but it's something we typically don't see. And also, he built a Stone of Gaia in late game, and he wasn't the only one. So, items that are currently not exactly super valued are actually making a bit of a comeback in the Pro League. Despite not being a specific counter item, Blackthorn Hammer remained very valued, especially on more aggressive solo laners overall. For example, Solo Troll built it on Camazotz right after Boots when he was playing against a Guardian. And also, on Camazotz we saw a Talisman of Energy in late game, an item that I'm always told is completely dead. It's actually being used in the Pro League sometimes. An interesting item strat that I saw in one of the games was swapping out Warrior Tabe for Reinforced Greaves in late game. Now this makes a lot of sense because Warrior Tabe is an item you primarily build for early pressure and clear, which doesn't really have that much impact at late stages. The extra tankiness from Reinforced can do a lot for you though, especially if you have some more health focused items otherwise. So switching this out instead of going right for a more expensive last slot item can be an interesting way to bridge a gap if you just need some extra reinforcements really quickly. And last but not least, probably the coolest pick that we saw so far was a Baron Samedi solo pick with a full-on tanky bruiser build. I really enjoyed that one and I hope we see a little bit more of Baron Samedi in general again. Moving on to middle lane. Mage's Blessing is definitely valued again, and it's valued a lot. That's because it finally got the buff that people had been asking for ages, and it got a 10 power increase, and now is very, very stat efficient for those early stages. Some mids also value Shoes of the Magi right now. We've seen it being built not only on Oloran but also on Merlin and Harbois. While the lifesteal is a nice benefit, I think the bigger reason here is that it just gives you so much pressure, so much clear in the early game, and that allows for more aggressive plays in general. Spear of the Magus was actually built on Ragin, even though everyone thinks it's super useless at the moment. Sanguine chose to build this on Regen right after Divine Ruin. And as we already talked about Merlin, there were a few specific things for Merlin that were interesting. Wolfie built him with double lifesteal, Bancroft's Talon and Typhon's Fang. We saw Staff of Myrddin being used on him, and he was one of the gods where Charon's Coin was used. Charon's Coin was used on a few gods, but not on every run, so it's not super core, at least in the Pro League. Aphrodite was picked, because of her buffs, by Veneno and Dardis, and in one of the games she was built with Celestial Legion Helm, which I think is a completely undervalued item at the moment. Definitely want to keep an eye on. Even though many people would build Aphrodite with a breastplate instead, I think this is a bit of a sleeper one. And there was also the obvious Cursed Ankh coming out as a counter for her at the same time. There was also a pick of Amusen Cup, which I only think is worth noting here because the last item built after a bunch of damage items was Runeforged Hammer, and I thought it was cool to see that come out on this specific god again. It always had a fair bit of usefulness there, but hasn't really been picked up much as of late. And that brings us to support. When it comes to Hand of the Gods, that item is actually used as a start on Yemoja, primarily because she doesn't need any mana potions, but we also saw it on Horus, and some players even take it later in the game to get extra secures through that. Buying it just drastically increases your pressure at the very start of the game, and also means that weaker comps don't get outcleared super hard on level 1 to the point where they lose their purple buff for it. So the starting build is Guardian's Blessing plus tier 1 boots, and then however many health pots, mana pots, or Hand of the Gods you can fit in your inventory. While the choice of boots heavily depends on the exact pick, with Yemoja for example heavily favoring CDR boots, we saw a fair few choices of Traveler's Shoes or Talaria boots, which I think is something that we haven't seen as much in the meta for a while, and I think it's interesting that it's coming back. Assassin supports are still valued at least by Obey, who picked Serket and Fenrir, though I wouldn't necessarily say that they work for every combo or every playstyle. The item variety in support is actually surprisingly high at the moment. We saw multiple Sovereignty rushes, sometimes, but not always, with Gauntlet of Thebes after that. We saw people rushing Gauntlet of Thebes after boots, and we also saw Breastplate of Valor rushes, especially on Yemoja, of course, as she benefits so much from the CR from the mana. So there really is a lot of flexibility, and even after that we saw Pridwin, we saw Relic Dagger still being picked, though not as prominent as before, and we also saw items like Oni Hunter's Garb, Spectral Armor, even Ethereal Staff on Fafnir and Kuzenbo. Yes, you heard that right, Kuzenbo was picked in his pre-buff state by Raffer, and he was picked with Thorns as a relic as well, though it was worth noting here that he was picked into Aphrodite, so it was mostly as a punishment for her heal basically. And something that I already mentioned in the solo section, and it comes up again here, is Stone of Gaia. It was also picked in late game on the same team, on Kuzenbo. A very unusual pick that we saw was Tyr support by Awesome Jake, with Relic Dagger right after boots, then Sovereignty, Ancile, Masamune and Mantle of Discord. So there's some interesting stuff going on in support. Last but not least, Polar Bear Mike also brought an Athena pick, something we had not seen in a very long time. And then we have one more honorable mention, which is Mulan being picked in general. So far not super successful, but we'll see if that possibly changes with the buffs that she got now. So with this, you now have plenty of things that are currently happening and working in the Pro League, and you can go ahead and try out those in your games if you want to see if it's something you would also enjoy. If you enjoyed this new format, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I'll continue it for future Pro games in the coming weeks. And if you're not subscribed yet, feel free to hit the sub button and maybe the bell so that you would get notified if another one of these videos comes out, or the Loki video comes out, or the Is SMITE Growing video comes out, or all the other stuff that I have still planned that I'm still working through gradually. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you all for the next one soon. DukeSloth, out.